My grandfather built this factory with his bare hands in 1974. For 50 years, it provided for our town and our family. I gave 15 years of my life to these walls. My brother, Julian, he didn't even give 15 minutes. When our father passed away, he saw a legacy. I saw a responsibility. But Julian had a secret. He had already signed a deal with a predatory private equity firm to sell the land and turn the factory into luxury condos. He ousted me from the board, fired 200 loyal employees, and called me obsolete. He thought he was a genius for liquidating our history. He didn't realize that our grandfather was a much smarter man than he ever gave him credit for. I didn't just find a way to stop him. I found a way to make Julian pay for every single job he destroyed. My father was a traditionalist. He believed in sweat equity. I started on the floor, learning the machines. Julian, he went to an Ivy League school and never looked back. When Dad got sick, Julian returned. He wasn't there to help. He was there to modernize. He started talking about asset optimization and efficiency. I saw the way he looked at our employees, not as people, but as line items on a spreadsheet. The day of the funeral, before the dirt was even settled, Julian called an emergency board meeting. He had used Dad's final confused weeks to get a signature that gave him 51% control. He walked into that boardroom and looked at me with a smirk that I'll never forget. "Thanks for keeping the seat warm, sis. But the adults are taking over now." The first thing Julian did was fire the old guard, men and women who had worked for my father for 30 years. He stripped their pensions and replaced them with automated systems that didn't work. Then he fired me. He claimed I was resisting progress. I was escorted out by security guards who had known me since I was a toddler. It was the most humiliating moment of my life. But as I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching the gates close, I remembered something. My grandfather was a Plan B kind of man. He used to say, if you build a house, always make sure you be the only one who knows where the foundation's weak spot is. I spent the next 4 weeks in my basement, going through my grandfather's original 1974 founding charter. Everyone thought it was just old paper. They're wrong. I found it in the fine print of Section 12. The Community Stewardship Clause. My grandfather had deeded the land to the company, but he had deeded the access rights to a separate family trust that only activated if the workforce was reduced by more than 50%. Julian was so busy selling the building to developers that he didn't realize the developers couldn't actually access the building without the trust as permission. But I needed more. I looked into Julian's private equity partners. I found that Julian hadn't just sold the company. He had taken a massive personal loan against the sale to cover his own gambling debts in Macau. If the sale didn't go through by the end of the quarter, Julian wouldn't just be poor. He'd be in default to some very dangerous people. The developers were ready to sign the final $50 million check. Julian was sweating, thinking about his debts. I walked in unannounced. I didn't scream. I just laid the 1974 charter on the table. I explained to the developers that they were buying a building that was legally landlocked. To get into the factory, they would have to pay the family trust, which had controlled a usage fee of $2 million per month. The developers turned white. They pulled the deal immediately. Julian's face went from pale to a terrifying shade of gray. Without the sale, Julian's loan came due. He was desperate. I offered him a deal. I would buy his 51% share of the company, but I wouldn't pay the market value. I offered him exactly what he had left in his bank account, $1 and the assumption of all his debts. Julian signed. He had no choice. He left the state that night, running from the creditors he couldn't pay. Last I heard, he's working as a low-level telemarketer in a city where no one knows his name. I reopened the factory. We rehired every single person Julian fired. We aren't making luxury condos. We're making the parts that keep this country moving, just like my grandfather intended. Revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about taking what they tried to destroy and making it whole again. Have you ever had to fight for a family legacy? Tell me your story in the comments. Subscribe for more Revenge Chronicles. History remembers the builders, not the liquidators. I'll see you in the next one.